Hi, welcome back. It's Anna
and Rose,
coming to you from the Mystery Parlor.
Angels and devils are part of the age-old question of good and evil. What we really want to know is who they are, what they are, where they are, when do they show up, how, and why. We will cover a few first-hand accounts of people who have encountered or believe they have encountered such beings. Then we shall do a little dive into how demons or devils try to influence us in both big ways and small, mostly small.
We have done our best to research and briefly simplify a few different groups and historical beliefs when it comes to these entities or spiritual beings. I hope we nailed it, and I hope we don't offend anyone.
As far back as 1550 BC, in the ancient Egyptians' funerary compositions, there are spiritual beings referenced that would help the dead journey through the afterlife.
It seems Hindus have minor gods referred to as devas and asuras, or angels and titans, more frequently explained as powers of light and powers of darkness.
Buddhism is a little more vague, but does acknowledge that there are numerous unseen living beings. Depending on the level of spirituality attained, one might actually be able to see some of these beings or the realms that they reside in.
Rose and I are most familiar with the Judeo-Christian angels, archangels, devils, and demons. The first mention was about 3,000 years ago, written in Hebrew scriptures. The main angel and devil Bible story basically goes like this. God made angels. Some of them got together and revolted. They were upset about the creation of man and man's ability to procreate. The leader of the rebellion we often refer to as Satan, Lucifer, Beelzebub, and many other names. God cast this group from heaven, and they are often called the fallen ones, or demons and devils.
Muslims believe in angels and archangels as well. They also have jinns or genies. These menacing beings were created by Allah and reside in another world from mankind, but can cause physical or mental harm to humans. Jinns are mentioned in the Quran around 30 times. We are guessing there must be a portal in bathrooms because that's where we find that they cause the most trouble.
I learned about the jinn a few years ago when one of my friends hosted a Muslim girl as an exchange student. My friend would find the students' underclothes, typically a tank top and underwear, completely wet and wrung out in the laundry room every day. Finally, she asked her if she was pre-washing them, and she, just wanted to let her know that that wasn't necessary. The girl informed my friend that she showered with these items on to cover her privates so the jinn wouldn't see her naked. Yikes.
These angelic stories we are about to tell are all first-hand accounts from people we know.
We have a family friend named Caitlin, whose miraculous angelic story goes like this. Caitlin was 13 weeks pregnant and was at her OBGYN appointment. Her husband, Zach, came along for this appointment because they were planning to hear the baby's heartbeat for the very first time.
The doctor gave them an A+ for effort, but couldn't find a heartbeat. Caitlin was measuring right at 13 weeks, so they sent her down the hall for an ultrasound in hopes that the baby was just doing a good job of hiding from the fetal Doppler.
Sadly, the ultrasound tech did not find the much anticipated heartbeat either. She took Caitlin's hand and said, "I'm sorry to advise you, this is not a viable pregnancy."
Caitlin heard this loud and clear, but there was another voice at the same time. Even though Caitlin had heard of guardian angels and had seen pictures and statues of them her entire life, she never considered that they could possibly be real or that she had one of her own.
The other voice, that is, spoke just as clearly and at the same time as the ultrasound tech, but Caitlin heard and understood both sentences simultaneously.
Caitlin also intuitively knew the other voice was her guardian angel. She didn't question for a moment who the voice belonged to. She just knew. And she knew the message was for her alone and that nobody else heard it.
Here's what the voice said. "And you are going to have twins."
This voice and message was so comforting that even though she grieved the pregnancy loss, it gave her hope.
Caitlin had surgery to remove the pregnancy. This might be TMI, but it was discovered that the baby had an extra chromosome because her egg was damaged and it had let 2 sperm in.
Because of this, the doctor was checking Caitlin's hormone levels weekly until they returned to normal, because this type of miscarriage can cause a cell growth in the uterus if any of the pregnancy is left behind.
In week 6, Caitlin's numbers spiked. Her doctor scheduled an ultrasound for the next day to see if there was anything left behind from the previous pregnancy. Caitlin was told she was most likely going to need another procedure right away to remove whatever was missed.
The next day was Caitlin's mom's birthday. Up until now, Caitlin had not shared that second voice or its message with anyone. She called her mom and told her that they were not going to find any part of her previous pregnancy, that they were going to find twins. Then she shared with her mom the entire experience and message that she received.
Caitlin's mom was very concerned. She called her son-in-law, Caitlin's husband, right away. They concluded that the miscarriage must be weighing much heavier on Caitlin than they realized, and that she needed psychiatric help.
That was until the ultrasound the following day, on her mother's birthday. The ultrasound tech found 2 fertilized eggs in Caitlin's womb and no signs of the previous pregnancy.
The doctor was cautiously optimistic. He said they were finding these so early that there was a good chance that she would just have a normal period, and had she not had the ultrasound, would have never known she was pregnant. Or there was also a high likelihood that only one of the fertilized eggs would continue into a normal pregnancy.
Caitlin smiled, knowing and trusting that she was going to have twins. And she did. 2 very healthy babies.
Caitlin feels like she got a bonus baby, and it came with the comforting message of an angel.
Our next 2 angel stories happened in churches. The first one goes like this. There was a couple who were getting married in an old church. Once inside, leading into the actual church sanctuary, were 2 swinging large copper doors that were approximately 15 feet tall and 6 feet wide. These doors took 2 hands and some weight to push them open into the church sanctuary, where all the rows of benches or pews were located.
The church was full of wedding guests. The bride was at the altar. The heavy doors to the outside were closed.
Suddenly, the very heavy, large copper swinging doors into the sanctuary started moving by themselves. They were fully opening into the vestibule, then swinging fully open into the church, then back and forth again and again. This went on for over a minute. Everyone was looking back at the doors instead of at the wedding party at the altar. The bride and groom were staring at the swinging doors as well, wondering what in the world was causing this to happen.
The officiant chuckled and said, "It must be all the angels and saints coming in to witness the wedding." And with that, the doors stopped swinging and the wedding began.
We know and spoke to several guests that were at this wedding, and they all remember it the same. The couple is still married today. They don't know or can't explain why the doors did what they did, but they love the idea that the angels and saints attended their wedding.
I think it sounds kind of spooky and fun and angelic all at once.
Next, we're going to turn things around and look at the darker side of angels, the fallen ones, commonly referred to as demons or devils. But no worries, we will end with another guardian angel story so that you might be able to sleep tonight.
For many years, like 70 of them, a man in a city unlocked a church and adjoining chapel each day and got everything ready for morning services.
This man remained single his entire life. He never left his parents' home, which became his house, and he eventually passed away there, well into his 90s.
This man was very holy and sweet, always dressed in a jacket and tie, meek, mild, humble, and had a heart of forgiveness. He was truly a gem and didn't seem to fit into today's world.
He had seen things others around him couldn't. Mostly good. But
there was this one morning. He unlocked the main church, turned on the usual lights, and lit a few candles, and made sure everything was ready for early morning services.
Did we mention this was very early? The first service was at 6:15 a.m.
Next, he went to the chapel and went through his normal routine there as well.
When he returned to the main church to pray, there was a man near the altar. This man appeared to be in his 30s, and he was trying to move toward the altar, but he couldn't. His body was contorted, moving in an unnatural way, like something invisible was holding or pushing him back.
Our friend started walking towards him to ask if he needed anything, as it was unusual to have a stranger in the church this early in the morning. He hadn't noticed any other cars other than his own in the parking lot on his way back to the main church from the chapel.
That is when the man's body started arching backward. His feet were firm on the ground, his arms slowly flailing, and his entire torso arched all the way back, with his head right above the ground. It was like he was doing a full back bend, but without putting down his hands.
Our friend froze at first. It took him a moment to understand what he was witnessing. That is, that he was dealing with a demon or a man being influenced or possessed by one.
The man's eyes were wide open, and a guttural moan, then scream, came from him that filled the entire church.
Our friend stopped where he was, midway to the altar. He quietly went into the closest pew, knelt down, bowed his head, and began praying out loud. He never looked up again until he heard people coming into the church. He guesses he was praying for about 15 minutes or so.
The man was gone. He didn't hear him leave, he doesn't know where he went, and he never saw him again.
If I've ever met a saint in my life, this man was it, and we have some other stories about him coming up in future episodes. Speaking of the church, possession, and possessed people needing an exorcism, we highly recommend the 2023 film, The Pope's Exorcist, which is currently available on Netflix.
That is the only actual demonic-esque story we're going to share today, but we're going to talk about a famous demon duo, Screwtape and Wormwood.
C.S. Lewis is the author of the Chronicles of Narnia, commonly known by the name of one of the books in the Chronicles, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Anyway, in 1941, he wrote letters for a weekly religious newspaper called The Guardian. A year later, in 1942, the letters were put together and published as a book called The Screwtape Letters.
Screwtape and Wormwood are demons whose task is to influence their patients, aka humans, to become eternally damned.
Screwtape schools Wormwood on how to accomplish this throughout the ever-changing events of his patients' lives.
What we found unsettling about this tale of good versus evil is that it didn't matter the circumstance, there was always a way to manipulate towards evil. No matter the patient's opinion, the demon's job was to make that opinion extreme and blown out of proportion.
In other words, help the patient either take an unusually extreme or an unusually passive stance on everything.
Another ploy was to have patients focus on objects instead of becoming self-aware.
To have them waste time doing things that are neither fulfilling or that they even liked. An example was given: watching a fire in the fireplace for no reason, all night long instead of sleeping. Not because they loved watching it or to keep the family safe, just because.
If cell phones were invented at the time Screwtape was written, I'm pretty sure staring at your phones all night would have been used instead of watching a fire.
Guilty.
The main point of the cell phone, or fire watching, is to keep people distracted. Screwtape and Wormwood love keeping their patients distracted.
It is a very twisted tale. For instance, if they have a virtuous patient, make them aware of how virtuous they are, and voila, now your patient is proud. Not just proud of themselves for being so virtuous, but now they are noticing or judging how others are lacking virtue.
In the end, it all comes down to temptation. Will the patient generally resist the free will to be tempted and become full of light, or be sucked into fulfilling the darkness?
like almost everything else, the screw tape letters scare the crap out of me. Now would be a good time to mention that fear is one of Screw Tape and Wormwood's biggest tools. I guess I'm still a work in progress.
Now is a good place to bring back the guardian angels.
This is about a young lady named Jenna. Jenna was married with a child, but going through a rough patch. Her husband was having some trouble at work, and there were other trials and tribulations young families often go through.
Jenna leaned on her faith in God, but, like Caitlin from our first story today, she didn't give much thought to angels or guardian angels. That was until one Sunday in church.
Jenna was praying for help from God with all the things that were causing her so much anxiety and stress.
It seems heaven heard her prayers because slowly white feathers started falling on her during the church service. From tiny little down feathers less than an inch long to ones that were 2 to 3 inches long. The longer ones had more structured barbs and full, fluffy after feathers at the base. All the feathers were white.
Jenna looked around, especially up above her, to see where they were coming from. What she saw left her in awe. There wasn't an explanation. They just seemed to be materializing and falling. Even more incredible is they were only falling on her.
Jenna had tears welling up in her eyes. Were the feathers an acknowledgement that her prayers were being heard by heaven? Was God sending her angels to help her? Or was she losing her freaking mind? Either way, in the moment it felt comforting. She started stuffing her pockets with the feathers to prove to herself later that this really happened.
Church ended, and Jenna couldn't wait to show her husband the feathers. While standing outside their minivan, after putting their little one into the car seat, she pulled out 2 handfuls of feathers.
He was like, okay.
And she started explaining to him what had happened. And again, white feathers started falling on her. But this time she was outside and had a blue sky above her, and there were no birds in sight.
Right then and there, Jenna got overwhelmed with the feeling that guardian angels are real. Yes, like holy shit, real. And hers is at her side during these times, helping her.
Since the feather incident, Jenna has asked her guardian angel many times to intercede for her. She has even asked it to talk to other people's guardian angels as an advocate.
Recently, angels and demons have been looped in with UFO and the UAP topic. Is there a spiritual component to UFO and UAPs, or even alien encounters? There are many similarities. Both are considered unexplained. Both are associated with the sky. Both are possibly interdimensional, and at times, both are otherworldly in visual description.
Considering these entities have been observed throughout time and from all corners of the globe, could angel and demon encounters be interchanged with UAP and alien encounters? We think it has potential, but we've never heard of angels and demons traveling by crafts that can be retrieved by the JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, which is a part of the United States Special Operations Forces. We've also never heard of angels and demon reverse engineering yet.
Our last bit of info we find interesting and want to share with you is that the Vatican has been actively involved with astronomy since the 1500s. They are currently partnered with the University of Arizona, where they have an observatory and telescope. If one of the most secretive data-collecting churches on Earth has been deeply invested in watching the skies for over 500 years, we're guessing that there is a valid reason.
Rose and I returned from the Copper Harbor area in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Sadly, we really wanted to see the Northern Lights, but we got there a day late and left a day early for the display. We did get to see the Milky Way, though. The sky and stars were spectacular around 3 a.m. every morning.
We spoke to a man setting up his photography equipment on the first evening we were there. He told us that around 3 a.m. that morning, he and his wife had seen a blue light appear over Lake Superior. It grew in circumference, then quickly shot away from them.
My husband Alan took our dog out in the middle of the night alone and woke me up upon returning and dragged my tired butt outside with him. I always notice the constellation Orion's Belt first. Seeing it submerged with so many other stars made me second guess whether that was what I was seeing. Along with being amazed with the Milky Way, we noticed small lights moving erratically, very high, like too high for an airplane, in the sky. Actually, we were in such a remote area, none of us saw an actual airplane the entire week we were there.
On another night, Tony and I were stargazing around 1 a.m. We could see more stars than at home, but it was still an hour or two away from the darkest point in the night, which would have been even better. We also saw something unexplained over Lake Superior. I pointed it out to Tony, and he could see it also. We were staring at an erratically flashing light traveling across the sky, near the Big Dipper. My mind immediately thought of an airplane, but the flashing was not constant, and it was much higher than any plane would be traveling. It didn't travel out of our sight. Instead, it just stopped flashing, like it ceased to exist. Before you ask, Tony insists that it was not a shooting star.
We leave you with this question. Is there a spiritual component to UFO, UAP phenomena? Are there entities crossing over between realms, including ours? Could these beings be interdimensional angels and/or demons?
Let us know what you think. You can send us an email using the link in the description. We promise to read and respond to all messages.
If you'd like to help us bring you the best spooky content, information, and all the episodes we are researching sooner than later, Rose is going to share how you can help support the Mystery Parlor.
We have created a page on a website called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can support us by giving us a one-time donation or subscribing to us for exclusive content. You can find this using the link in the description.
Your support will help us with things like upgrading our equipment, planning on-site episodes, arranging for guest speakers, and more frequent episodes.
You can stay up to date on new episodes by following us on Instagram.
Thanks for listening.
Bye for now.